Yo creo que el clásico ellos lo dijeron bien. El clásico para nosotros es diferente. Tú estás jugando para una ciudad cuando nosotros jugamos, a San Diego, Los Ángeles. Pero cuando tú tienes un país entero atrás de ti, yo creo que es diferente. Yo creo que eso es especial. ¿Sabes? Y ese peso es más grande que muchas cosas que jugamos. Yo creo que, ¿sabes? Que ganar esto, estar aquí y traerle un trofeo para atrás para Dominicana va a ser más especial que una serie mundial, sí.
Welcome to Marty Time TV, brought to you by the all-new Jamul Casino Resort, the Players Place. I am Marty Caswell. That is Darren Smith, and that is our friend Eric Gomez from ESPN. Yes, I was playing Manny Machado from a WBC presser because, number one, I cannot get enough of press conferences in the WBC, which has been amazing. But I heard the word Dodgers in there and Padres in there, so I wanted to see if we can get an interpretation of what was said. Good morning, everybody. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Marty. I mean, I was about to set you up. You guys need me to translate that, or are you good? Because
yeah,
I'm impressed with Manny's Manny's Spanish has apparently gotten better, because I remember hearing him the first few years with the Padres, and even before then with the Orioles. For whatever reason, he had trouble kind of switching from English to Spanish.
Oh.
So maybe it's just that he's been, immersed with the Dominican Republic team for the last few weeks or whatever. But that was rousing, man. That was captain type stuff right there.
Well, okay, good. I'm glad to hear. That was not part of the invite. You didn't read the details on the invite to join the show, that we also needed you to translate some of this stuff, since we're so enamored with the World Baseball Classic and we're loving what we're watching with the Dominican Republic and Team Mexico. So yeah. What did he say, by the way, Eric? I'm kind of curious myself to know what it was that Manny just said.
Yeah. So essentially he said it's different when you're playing and representing a country. He didn't name check the Dodgers and the Padres. He name checked the cities. He was like, it's different when you're, in Major League Baseball and you're representing a city like you would with San Diego or Los Angeles. But when you're representing an entire country, that's a little bit more special. So he's, essentially a little bit more excited to go out there and win gold for the Dominican Republic compared to what it's like to play for the Padres, for the Dodgers, for the Orioles, whatever. And, again, I thought that was especially rousing.
I'm learning so much on this show in the short time we've been here, because I did not realize that Manny's Spanish was considered bad or a subpar.
It wasn't bad.
I mean, not bad. I mean, but and by the way, on this presser, right, the entire thing was in Spanish. All the questions were presented to him in Spanish. All the answers were in Spanish, and some of them, they had an interpreter. Like they had Juan Soto and Tatis on stage together, and they had an interpreter there. So I thought this was interesting, but I did not realize maybe Manny is rejuvenated. just being around the DR team, the dancing will be better, the baseball is going to be better, and most importantly, the Spanish is better. So
yeah, I mean, like he never had bad Spanish. I think it was just the sense that whenever he would be, in the States and surrounded by English speaking people, it would, maybe cost him a little bit more to kind of switch back to Spanish. I mean, that's kind of common for all of us. So I'm just impressed that he was able to rattle that off as quickly as he did. But yeah, man, I'm ready to run through a wall for that guy.
Well, that's why he's the captain. So he has, I think notably, he's been named the captain of the Dominican team. By the way, I have started following Los Dominicanos on Instagram because I cannot get enough behind the scenes footage of what goes on, not only before the games, but also after the games. It just looks like these guys are having the best time of any team, totally unquantifiable, in the entire World Baseball Classic, and I can't get enough of it. Now, some of it is because some of these players, these are two prominent Padre players and a former prominent Padre player in Juan Soto. So, there's a connection to some of these guys. But, the question obviously comes up and there's a couple questions. Number one, he's the captain, Manny Machado is, of the Dominican team. And he's also referred to as like the unofficial captain of the Padres. Like, do you think, like, is this an opportunity for the Padres to just make this official? I don't, the whole team captain thing. I don't know what the conversation is worth, but is it a gesture maybe that the Padres should consider making with Manny Machado?
Yeah, I don't think they needed to do that because leaders lead ultimately, right? And Manny is definitely one of those guys that's going to put a stamp on a team. We all know that. But I think the fact that the Dominican Republic actually went ahead and put the C on his chest, That's pretty big. And, Craig Stammen being a former teammate of his, that's a good opportunity for him to kind of gain some extra brownie points inside of the locker room and say, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and give it to him. So yeah, I would agree completely. And as we speak, Tati just hit a grand slam for the Dominican Republic. So I mean, these guys are out there, they're having a ball. That Instagram feed is amazing, and it just looks like it's kind of an extended all-star weekend for them, and they're just having so much fun, but they're playing really, really hard. And I wouldn't, going into this tournament, everybody was talking about a potential rematch with the US and Japan in that final. And I think they kind of took that a little personally, the guys over at the Dominican Republic, because they haven't really done as well as you would expect over the course of this World Baseball Classic, with the amount of talent that they've provided for Major League Baseball over the last 50 years or so. You would expect them to dominate. They haven't. And I think this is kind of, this particular team going in there with a chip on their shoulder and trying to prove to the world that they are indeed number one.
Yeah. I hope that the energy that I hope the energy that Manny and Tatis are playing with right now, the absolute joy it translates. We spent so much time, Darren, on this platform and every platform, just trying to just go and break down, the lack of joy from Tatis. The dancing wasn't there, the swag wasn't there. And to your point, I have spent countless hours watching that feed, and it's highlighted by Tatis, the best answer on that team. By the way, between that and the Chili's delivery driver, have you guys seen that? Google that later on. It's fantastic that he got a $30 tip and he performed like a little impromptu rap for the screen. And
I didn't see this.
Oh, he's an autistic kid. It's fantastic. And took a shot at Applebee's about the chili slider. Anyways, I'm getting distracted, but
okay. It was really
the
good.
DR feed, the dancing, the energy. Yeah. If Craig Stammen wants to go ahead, right, and put a stamp on this Padres team, the moment Manny comes back, announce him as the captain. That's it. Let it go. Yeah. Right? We haven't seen this since the whole Nelson Cruz, the pinata celebration, which
in Mexico City, right?
Yes.
Yeah, where Eric is, right? I mean, that was it. Like that was like the highlight of the 2023 miserable season. Was like that moment on the field in Mexico City. And by the way, let's not exclude the Mexican national team here as well, because as we're chatting, it's Monday morning, and Mexico will play against the U.S. coming up shortly, but. 16-0, 16-0. And that feed has been a lot of fun as well. This is every 4 years, people ask the same questions. And it is, well, why, baseball should try to capture some of this, right? Look at what's going on in the stands. Look at all the, fans from the Caribbean, and look at all the fans that were in Houston supporting the Mexican team. Like why can't Major League Baseball? And, you understand it's different, right? Like a 6-month season is different than a, 2-3 week tournament every 4 years. However, two leagues that we're familiar with here, like the Nippon, the Japanese Professional Baseball League, they play 140 plus games. Eric, we're not too far away from Tijuana Toros, and those experiences are a lot different. I mean, it's probably a bridge too far to say it's going to look like that every night in Major League Baseball, but there are elements of what we're seeing during the WBC and from some other leagues around the world, right? And Petco Park comes as close to it as anybody. Yep. But how do you actually get that going? Like, how do you take from these other leagues, from this tournament, and apply that to Major League Baseball? Because people say the same thing every 4 years.
You want to be less international about it. The Savannah Bananas have done a fantastic job of making their particular brand of whatever that is as fun as it could possibly be. You don't need the shenanigans on the field, but I definitely believe that you can go into the stands and drum up a little bit more excitement. I mean, going to Petco Park, going to any major league park is a fantastic experience to this day for me. You can go out there and sit amongst the stands for hours and chat and eat snacks and have a beer or two and watch the game. But it's essentially like going out there and watching the Masters, right? It doesn't necessarily translate into excitement outside of what's going on or what might go on inside the field. So I agree with you guys completely. I mean, the Mexican Baseball League, the Summer League, they do a great job of maintaining that excitement. That's a 5-6 month league. So to that point, whatever Major League Baseball can do to allow folks in those stadiums, those organizations, to think outside the box and essentially bring fans closer to the spectacle, make them as, as part of what's going on as possible. I think that's just a great, a great initiative that they can think of. I'm not too keen on, the reggaeton that's like right up until the moment where the pitcher throws the ball, because it affects strategy. But, I mean, I've been to Toros games where you've got like dance squads in the stands, and you've got folks just running around and giveaways in the middle of innings and stuff like that. That's really fun, and it just makes the fans feel like they're a little bit more part of the spectacle than you would, again, like compared to Major League Baseball.
I would like to know why Petco Park was excluded from hosting any of the rounds this time. We had so much fun all those years ago. So hopefully next time, because to your both your points, if there was a ballpark here that exudes what we're seeing, the joy, the energy on a Tuesday night in the WBC, it is Petco Park. It is these Padres fans. So hopefully, Major League Baseball, if you're listening, Petco Park should be considered the next time around. Let's go.
Yeah, again, and again, like my first instinct was to just say, like, these are two totally different things. You can't compare apples to oranges. But then as you start to say, like, well, wait a second now, you do see these other leagues, right, Marty? Like, you probably know more about the Japanese baseball league, the Nippon, right? Like that league than any of us. Like, that's a totally different experience. Phil Nevin's son plays in that in that league, and the sun starts to come out here. If Phil Nevin's son starts to come out in that or play in that league, and like he's told me the whole experience is just like, he's like, what is it? Like a totally different universe, and they play 140 plus baseball games. So it can be done. It's not just about the stodginess of playing 162 games over 6 months, right?
It's loud, it's structured, and by the way, when those fans are done, they clean them up. They clean up after themselves. They pick up their own trash. They wipe their seats down. They leave it spotless. So let's go ahead and copy all. Let's emulate all of that.
Yeah, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Eric, tell us a little bit. I mean, I was really impressed watching the Mexican team. Again, the competition, you always have to take it into account. But up next, I want to ask a couple quick questions. Number one, a player that we talked about when we were back on the radio, a coach actually, is from San Diego's own, Benji Gil. He's a guy now. This is, I think, the second cycle through for him with the Mexican baseball team. I know they were talking about it on the broadcast in the States last night. They were talking about maybe he would get an opportunity to be a big league manager at some point. But in terms of this team, who they are, and give us a status report on the WBC team representing Mexico.
Mexico had a kind of a strange issue plaguing it. We talked about the DR to start this interview out, or to start the show out. But, Mexico, I think, was in that same boat, in that they specifically got off to a slow start, and nobody really knew why that was. So there were a lot of people kind of focused on that first game of this WBC against Great Britain, and they got off to a very slow start. I mean, it was 1-1 in the 8th inning, and they just exploded. But a lot of that has to do with Benji. He's been a fantastic manager, not just for the Mexican national team, but clearly in the Mexican Pacific League with Charros de Jalisco. He's won multiple titles in the Mexican Winter League, and he's a guy that I think does a really good job marketing himself, because he's, whenever I pop on MLB Network, he seems to be on it, So I think he's one of those guys that hopefully does get a chance, because this is, again, apples and oranges, WBC compared to a 162 game Major League Baseball season. But throughout his career, he knows what it takes to succeed in the United States. I mean, he did it as a player. He did it as a coach with the Angels. He came apparently pretty close to being named the Padres manager. He was considered for the Angels cycle last time around. So if he does well in this tournament, and I think it kind of behooves him to do that. I mean, Mexico was the 3rd place winner in 2023. If they can come close to that in 2026 with all the amazing teams that we've talked about, and we haven't even mentioned Venezuela and Puerto Rico, I think it would be a pretty good gamble for any Major League Baseball team to consider Benji to come in maybe in the middle of a season, or maybe starting just a new managerial cycle, 2027 and beyond. This is a guy that players absolutely love him. And as I said, he's had success in arenas where Major League Baseball scouts and managers and players will kind of tip their hat to and give respect to the Mexican Winter League and say, yeah, that's about as close to, between AAA and the big leagues as it gets historically. So he's a guy that I think can and should be considered for a managerial job in the future. And here's hoping he does, but he does pretty well for himself in Mexico. So, I wouldn't be too surprised if he wants to stay because they pay him really well. And he's a very popular figure.
I would argue, Eric, to your point, that it's a better situation for him to be the manager for Mexico than for Artie Moreno and the 1-year deal that because Suzuki got. I'm serious. I mean, what kind of a serious organization gives a manager a 1-year deal?
Artie Moreno might be on less than a 1-year deal at this point, though. So, so I wouldn't worry too much if I'm Kurt Suzuki. But yeah, that's, Angels, Padres, all these organizations that are up for sale. Those are ideally, for him, for Benji, landing spots in the future that he can look at and say, I'd like to manage there. But I think at this point, he'll take any job and he should, somebody should give him that opportunity. He's 53, 54 years old, I think. And one of those baseball lifers. So hopefully he does get that opportunity.
Can I just say real quick, Marty, before you go into Padre stuff, like it is interesting, right? Like, that you do have a couple of finalists for the Padres managerial gig at different points, right? Between Benji and Albert Pujols,
right?
Both out there now,
right?
Who are like really like on the main stage of this tournament. So, I mean, it is kind of interesting,
See what you could have had.
Yeah.
Right. Showing off with their exes.
Yeah.
It makes me nervous to see how much fun Toddy and Manny are having with Albert Pujols.
Especially when they get back to Peoria, they're going to be miserable. It's going to be complaining about everything again.
Tell them to listen, Craig Stammen and AJ Praller. Tell them to skip Peoria. I don't care when it happens. They cannot go to Bell and 83rd and like, oh, there's Red Robin. There's Applebee's. There's Olive Garden. I can't deal with this. Yeah. Let them go straight to Petco Park. Give them a week off. Petco Park. Have the energy ready for opening day. It just can't happen. Right.
Good point.
By the way, speaking of ex-Padres, how about Luís Arraez? What are you doing for Venezuela?
Yeah, he's on a tear. And I get the feeling that he's going to be hitting 340 for the Giants this year. He's just kind of on a revenge tour. He was injured last season. I understand that, and I think the vibes were definitely off there towards the end with Mike Schultz. So, you can attribute some of that to his subpar 2025 season, but I think this is a guy that models his game after Tony Gwynn, and I thought that was kind of a no-brainer for the Padres to re-sign him. And I get all the arguments, I get all the advanced statistics and the WAR and all that, and he doesn't really hit for power. He plays for a position where he's not necessarily a defensive plus as well, but I was kind of hoping that the Padres would keep him around. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he makes a run at 400 or something this year with the Giants.
You heard it here from first. Prediction from Eric Gomez: 400 for Luís Arraez. Complete regret.
And he's probably going to be like 30 of 40 this year against the Padres too.
100%.
Because that's just the way these things work.
The next Adrian Gonzalez who comes back to haunt the former Padres. So we'll see what happens. I'm speaking of the Padres. Not too much news right now as they still continue the battle, finding out who the leadoff hitter is going to be. I did see that note. Craig Stammen said that Nick Pivetta was dealing with arm fatigue. Darren, what's the first thing you think when you hear arm fatigue when it comes to a frontline pitcher for the Padres?
Arm fatigue? No. I mean, I think arm fatigue is pretty common in spring training, isn't it? I mean, it's usually like the soreness that I start going, red flag. The alarm bells start going off in your head. I think, the whole dead arm thing is pretty much like an annual. Somebody deals with it. At least one or two different pitchers deal with it every single spring training. So I don't worry too much about that. It's when you start, but I know what you're saying. Padres, speak euphemistically often about some of these injuries, and then the next thing you find out, he didn't actually just sleep on it wrong. He's got a nerve issue. Right? You're like, wait, what? Like, how did we get from A to B here? I'm not there yet with Pivetta because I think that the whole dead arm thing is more common than some of the other stuff that we're used to hearing. But that's just me.
I hope so.
I think
hopefully
elbow tightness is like the worst one, right? When you get that diagnosis, it usually means somebody's ligaments are not gonna make it through the entire season.
Not good, right? I mean, who is it? Brian Hoeing now is on to his third opinion, maybe. Second, third opinion. Usually, I think we kind of know which direction that one is unfortunately going in, but yeah, when you hear that sort of stuff, I will say the dead arm thing, right, Eric? I mean, that's usually something that a lot of teams deal with and a lot of pitchers deal with. So,
Yeah,
just going with
100%.
the upside, yeah.
100%. You know, I think the Padres are looking at having like 6 or 7 pitchers on the IL starting the season. So, I mean, hopefully Pivetta's not one of those guys, but, you know, that they're looking for the back end of that rotation to fill out. And I don't know about you, but I haven't really necessarily been too excited about Walker Buehler and Griffin Canning, who's one of those guys who's injured. But, you know, Herman Marquez, I think, might be a possibility. That Coors Field or whatever it's called now, fatigue is real. You know, that guy had like a 7 ERA last season, but he's got really good stuff. So, you know, the Padres, I think, are more focused on thinking about who their number 3, number 4, number 5 starters are going to be, because, you know, the front line of that rotation looks good. You know, Michael King is a guy that I have a lot of confidence in, and beyond that, Nick Pivetta showed what he had last season. So,
well, Craig, it does appear that Pivetta may not be on track to start opening day, which could leave it perhaps I would imagine Michael King, or perhaps Randy Vasquez, who's been so impressive this spring.
My God.
Before we move on to some other things, Eric, any buzz, Eric, Darren, that you guys are hearing about the possibilities for the leading candidate for the next Padres owner? It's been very, very quiet. And we're just
nothing new for me.
Nothing at all. I mean, I know here in Mexico City, one guy who's very interested in finding out what that process might look like is minority owner Alfredo Harpelú, right, who owns the Mexico City Red Devils down here and the team in Oaxaca. He owns 10% of the team. And initially, the report that I had was that he was in line to sell that 10% stake and basically cash out. Now it's not a certainty. He apparently likes the direction that the sale process is going in and wants to be a part of it going in, forward in the future, whether that means taking on a larger percentage or maybe selling a bit of his minority stake and staying on. That remains to be seen. But I think that's very interesting. You know, he was ready to cash out just a few months ago, and now he's back in. This is a guy that's in his mid 80s. So I think that's ironically a good sign for the Padres.
Good.
Okay. Sounds good.
It's a lot of money.
All right. For those of you guys watching the show on YouTube, on Marty Time TV, or listening to the Section 1904, by the way, I'm so mad at myself because I butchered the open. I should have said, welcome to Marty Time TV and the Section 1904 podcast, because we are making these shows available on Section 1904 on Apple, on Spotify. We will have YouTube streaming as well. But I appreciate the time from Eric Gomez. On this channel, it won't be just all Padres or all SDFC. We'll get to other things. At some point, I will put on a guest from NFL Network to talk about Tua no longer being. We'll talk about legal tampering. We'll talk enough for free agency. But the beauty of this show is we're going to hit everything that people care about. And right now, Darren, I know you had a big weekend. SDFC is now 3-0 after defeating Sporting KC, correct?
Correct. Sporting KC. Right. But what's most important is what's coming up next. Midweek, Wednesday, with Toluca Football Club coming to town. So this is Marty's exit. This is your Irish goodbying us.
This is my exit. I'll be lurking here because I want to hear the professionals do their thing, but I will learn a lot about you. And I know my August is he's a huge SDFC fan. We're coming to a game soon. Eric, thanks for the time. Hope to see you soon, not just in San Diego, but I'm not sure if Darren notified you this. We're taking up residence at your place next month when the Padres are there.
We're ready. We're ready.
Let's go for it.
All right. Deal. Well, Eric, stick around. All right, Marty. So this is Marty saying, okay, you guys I'll let the boys talk about soccer here for a little while. Eric, let me just start because, I'm making my way down to Mexico next week. So I will be heading down for not next week. Next week. So,
next week.
A little bit more than on the 18th, I'll be heading down there for the second leg of the Concacaf Champions Cup match between San Diego Football Club and Toluca. And, you live in Mexico City, obviously, and we're border town. I mentioned I wanted to go to Cholos last night, and the time change thing kind of messed with me a little bit. But Mexico, the country, has been in the news over the last couple of weeks, especially with the World Cup 95 days away, somewhere in that range, based on what it was that happened a few weeks back. I just wonder, I'm sure people, when I mention that I'm going to Mexico, people go, oh, really? Like, are you sure? What's going on down there? I saw some things on the news. You live there. I mean, what happened a couple of weeks ago, not to go all geopolitical, but, with the head of the cartel who was killed outside of Guadalajara, El Mencho, I believe was his name. You live there. Lots of people see images on social media and see images on the news, and they go, "Uh-oh, like that doesn't look good." As you know, as the audience knows, I got married in Puerto Vallarta, and I had more than a few relatives and friends reach out and say, "Oh man, it's a good thing." They're like, "How close to that was it? Like your wedding?" I'm like, "Real close." like our wedding caterer was like right on one of those corners where one of those cars were burning. The World Cup kind of got called into question here. Like, would FIFA ever consider? I don't think it ever got to that point, but I wonder if you could sort of, just tell us, at times like this, what it's like being somebody who lives in Mexico and dealing with it, because it's where you are, not necessarily right where you are in Mexico City, but also, everything else that comes with moments like that.
Yeah. So, as a quick aside, my wife and I were at a wedding outside of Mexico City that weekend, and we were slated to come back Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. When this entire thing went down, there were incidents along different parts of the country. And, my wife and I made the choice to stick around and try our luck on Monday, which was fine ultimately. The chaos and the aftermath of this military operation, joint military operation between Mexico and the United States, was essentially that Sunday, right? And I know the images were just brutal to watch for some, and seemed to be this, battle royale, this kind of civil war type thing going on in Mexico, which it really wasn't. There was isolated incidents, as I said, in different points of the country, yes, because that's basically the reach that this cartel has within Mexico, which is not nothing. So it was a show of power, and it was a show of retaliation. I think 27 or 20, I don't want to butcher the number, but a good amount of Mexican National Guardsmen were murdered in retaliation that day. So it was pretty gnarly. But beyond that, everything went back to normal instantly. And I do say that with a grain of salt, because the fact that this happened means that it can happen again, because Mexico is a country that is and has been ravaged by cartel violence over the last 20 to 25 years. That being said, this event never came into question, as you said, because there are certain guarantees that are being put forth by the Mexican government, being put forth by FIFA itself, as we move closer and closer to the tournament. And, a few days after this whole thing went down, FIFA President Gianni Infantino and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum had this phone conversation where all that information was laid out. And the first thing on the docket was the FIFA World Cup qualifiers, the playoff qualifiers that are scheduled to happen here in Guadalajara and in Monterrey in northern Mexico. 15 days from now, a couple of weeks from now, we're going to have these games involving national teams like Bolivia and Iraq and Suriname, and that's a whole other deal, because Iraq is dealing with very, very difficult issues that may not keep them from, or may keep them rather from traveling to Mexico. But essentially, FIFA signed off on everything, and again, I think people who are expecting to travel down to Mexico City or travel down to Guadalajara or travel down to Monterrey, anytime you travel anywhere, especially when it's an international destination, you got to just, take extra care of yourself. You're going into a place with a different culture, a different language. But I think Mexico has always done a good job of maintaining open arms for people that are coming out to these types of events. Nobody can guarantee your safety anywhere, really. So I will say that. And there have been times where I've felt unsafe in the United States as opposed to Mexico. I was pretty close to a school shooting one time. I'll just say that. But when it comes to Mexico, particularly and specifically in regards to this event, I think Mexico is ready, and they have been ready for a while in terms of the implications of hosting. There will be some infrastructure issues with Mexico City, just some streets. They're working on the stadium, and we're, as you said, 3 months out from the the initial kickoff, Mexico and South Africa. Other than that, this is the city, and I was walking around this past weekend with my wife, And there are certain neighborhoods in the city, in Mexico City, where you hear more people speaking English than you do Spanish. So I would just take those pronouncements from people who say coming down to Mexico is essentially a death sentence or something like that with a grain of salt, because there are thousands and thousands of Americans in different parts of Mexico, Mexico City, Puerto Vallarta, as you said, Cancun, etc., every single day, and everything just goes on without incident. So again, yeah, it's up to every individual to make their choice. But as far as the hospitality and the way people are going to treat you down here, that's always been a constant, and that's always been a positive experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most visited countries in the world, for a reason. And it's a great place. And I've been there countless times. So I think everybody knows my position on visiting Mexico. And to your point, like you said, I always remember the first time that I took my wife to a Cholos match. She tells her parents who don't live here, they're like, "Oh, wait, what? Tijuana? Are you sure?" And we went down. We had an amazing time. We went out. We ate. We watched the match. Couldn't have been better. And we were living in North Park at the time, and we were in an Uber from the border on the way back, and we had to get diverted around. There was police activity. There was a shooting like 2 blocks from our house. And I always remember the irony of that, of everybody, of some level of concern because you're going to Tijuana. Not, again, we all understand, if you're not looking for trouble, you probably won't find it in most situations anywhere in the world. But I always remember that, just like the irony of like having to drive 2 miles out of our way in a taxi because there was a shooting and the streets were closed closer to our house. I don't think it ever got, I mean, there was never any real threat. Did you ever feel like there was any real conversation about, even if it was just Guadalajara, of any matches being moved, or there was any concern about whether or not there would be that the host would be changed? I never felt like that at all. It just seemed to be chatter in the ether.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, you can't go by what randos on social media say,
Right.
honestly.
Right.
Some of these people might call themselves reporters, commentators, journalists, whatever, but they never had any inside information as to what might happen, not on the FIFA side, and definitely not on the Mexican government side. I always have believed that this tournament, there were people bemoaning that Mexico didn't get more games in the World Cup. I talked about some of the infrastructure issues. There was no reason to do that. I think the amount of games that Mexico is getting, plus the World Cup playoff qualifiers, is a good, decent amount. And there are questions to be asked about what's going on in the U.S. right now, right?
Mhm.
And we've had several months where there's been civil unrest and instability in different places across the United States. You don't hear anybody talking about, having FIFA take the World Cup away from the US. And because it's ludicrous, it shouldn't happen. So when you use Mexico as part of that conversation, I think it says more about some people than it does about those of us who are in the audience listening. I'm down with giving Canada 104 games, like straight up. They can host the entire tournament for all I care. No, I'm obviously kidding. And we spoke about this on a podcast for ESPN. Tell me one World Cup in this century that has not had significant issues, whether it's, again, infrastructure issues, human rights violations issues in the case of Qatar, and in Brazil, in the last 24 years, in the last certainly the World Cups that have been held in the 21st century. There have always been significant issues, whether it's before, during, or after the tournament, and we don't question it, right? I think now we just live in an age of social media where everything gets absolutely blown up and magnified. And anything that happens, whether it's very, very serious or somewhat serious or not even a thing, can become the focus of everybody's attention, and just kind of driving a conversation a certain way. So Mexico will be fine. People who visit Mexico during the World Cup will be fine. And this is an event that comes around once every 4 years. I think we should all just be happy that it's in our neck of the woods.
Mhm.
At this point in time. I know that it's going to be a hassle for a lot of people, but ultimately it is what they purport it to be, which is a party. And now we're going to get this expanded World Cup with, as I said, 104 games. we're going to be able to enjoy it for a little bit longer, those of us who are soccer fans. So it's going to be great.
I love it. I landed in Mexico City late December, early January. And like, you can feel like already, like the anticipation was there. They had this massive soccer ball that is hanging. I mean, it has to be 20, 30 feet tall, and it is hanging outside of the airport in Mexico City. And, you know, I don't know that they're doing that in some of the other host cities in the US. So like, they were already starting to get into the spirit of it. Understanding now this being the third time that Mexico has hosted the World Cup. So like they're starting the celebration, which I think is great. You know, it is called the United Bid, right? Like it's in Canada, the US, and Mexico. Does it feel like it's all part of the same thing, or do you get the sense it's like, okay, like the 13 games that are going to be played in Mexico are kind of separate from the games that are being played in Canada and separate from the games that are being played in the US? Like the whole United Bid thing sounded good in concept, and I'm not so sure that as we get closer to this tournament that's, you know, exactly the sentiment from the three teams here in North America.
I mean, covering soccer as I have for the last, 15 plus years, you realize that even within one country bids, there are significant ways in which people divvy up the work. And by that, I mean, every single city has its own host city committee, right? And they think about ways to take advantage of the World Cup based on their links to city governments, state governments, federal governments, and try to make, you know, the Mexico City World Cup experience their own, and the Monterrey Mexico City, World Cup experience their own, compared to Kansas City or Boston or LA or New York, New Jersey. So it never really feels like these World Cup bids are united in that sense. And,
Right.
and I know that, and it's a play on words that they did that with these three countries and all the NAFTA TLC connections that exist within those three governments and those three countries. But everybody's doing their own thing. And I think the biggest example of that is we see that New York, New Jersey canceled their FIFA Fan Festival, right? This is a completely optional thing. Some cities, some countries are charging people to make their way to those FIFA Fan Festivals. Others are offering it for free. Then you've got cities like Kansas City who just won the soccer jackpot, and they're going to have Argentina out there. They're going to have England out there. They're going to have the Netherlands out there. And they're making a very concerted push to just basically making sure that their infrastructure is up to snuff, and making sure that people can get to wherever they're staying from the stadium and vice versa. Mexico City, as I said, is this sprawling urban landscape, as you know, and there are multiple opportunities for people to stay as close to Azteca or Banorte Stadium, as it's called now, as they possibly might need. But some cities don't have that option. So it really feels like everybody's doing their own thing, to your point. And the three governments and the three committees for each country have not really been in contact with each other. They just really don't care what everybody else is doing. And we've seen that from Canada. Canada's been, groaning from day one that this is going to cost way too much. And guess what? It's costing them way too much. So, you're going to get a different experience in Vancouver than you're going to get in Dallas, than you're going to get in Guadalajara. And I think that's kind of the fun of it as well, too, to have this completely different experience wherever you go.
Yeah, I know. I mean, even New England is still in the news. Like they're arguing over $8 million for some security bill. And New England, where the Patriots play, they're like, well, maybe we won't have these games. You're like, wait, what? Like people are already booking flights and booking tickets. So I don't even know the way that's all going to work out as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I have a couple dates circled on the calendar that are in the Mexican cities. I mean, I'd much rather go there, but we have time to talk about that. Eric, one of the things, as Marty mentioned, SDFC improves to 3-0 over the weekend, beating Sporting Kansas City. We talked for the opening round of Concacaf Champions Cup. San Diego Football Club drew Pumas in Mexico City. Beat them 4-1 here in San Diego, held on in the second leg, advanced, and their reward for advancing in their first ever Concacaf Champions Cup is Toluca, which just feels like it is firing on so many cylinders. Head coach Antonio Mohamed El Turco, who we might remember from Club Tijuana, from Cholos back in the day. He's won 6 league titles. I mean, this guy is really proven to be one of the best coaches that we've seen in quite a while. What is SDFC getting into Wednesday night at home against Toluca, then the return leg next Wednesday, the 18th in Toluca? You and I are going to that one.
We are. Toluca, they won back-to-back titles, and they're undefeated in Liga MX after 10 games. So that should tell you that this is one of the best teams that Mexico has seen in quite a while. And we're coming off a stretch in which Club America won 3 straight titles in Mexico. It is extremely difficult to do that in Mexican football because of the parity that exists among the top 6 or 7 teams. You know, your Cruz Azul, your Chivas, your Monterrey, Tigres, Club America, and obviously now Toluca. They are just an absolute machine. They have lost some of their best players to injury in the Mexican national team over the course of the season, Marcel Ruiz, Alexis Vega, and they've been fine. It's been next man up for them. So in many ways, this team reminds me of what SDFC has been able to achieve in their first year plus in MLS. Just a team that is completely committed to the goal. They play in service of one another and not individually. And they have a fantastic relationship with their head coach. So I know that Antonio Mohamed, he's not getting bored of winning in Liga MX, but an international title with a team like Toluca would be the ultimate feather in his cap. So you mentioned San Diego FC. What are they getting into? I think this is going to be one of the best games, one of the best series that we're going to watch throughout this entire CONCACAF Champions Cup, because these are just two amazingly well-balanced teams that are going to be facing off in a couple of days here. And I know that Toluca, they were interested in getting the aforementioned Alexis Vega back, who's been their best player throughout this year plus run, at least in the conversation to start against SDFC on Wednesday. He came off the bench yesterday and played, I think, 20 or 25 minutes, and he looked really good. So he might not start the game in San Diego, but I think he's on track to start on the 18th in Toluca. And they're hoping that, Antonio Mohamed, if anything, he's a pragmatist. And he'll go out there to San Diego. He'll try to get a goal or two for sure. He's not going to park the bus back there. But this is a guy who understands these types of series with just a fantastically strategic mindset. He knows that it's a 180-minute game, as Mikey Varas does. So as I said, I think this particular match in San Diego on Wednesday is going to be very, very interesting, because I think San Diego FC is going to realize that they need to win out in San Diego to make sure that they don't get into a situation like they were maybe afraid of last time around against Pumas. It all worked out fantastically for them, and they put pressure on Pumas to go out back to Mexico City and try to make up the ground that they lost. I think the mentality is going to be exactly the same for Mikey Varas this time around, and this time it's going to be a lot more difficult to achieve than it was last time for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I feel it sort of feels that way. To your point, Toluca hasn't lost since December. Right, since they were in the playoffs. They're on an incredible run, 8 wins, 3 draws. Adrian Garcia Marquez said this over the weekend. Did they rest a couple of starters? Like, were they?
They did.
They did. They played against Juarez on Sunday or Saturday. I don't know which day. But like he said that they were resting, and I think that's an interesting point, because like you said, and like we said a little bit earlier, the head coach of Toluca, for those that don't know, he's won 6 league titles, 6 Mexican league titles, tournaments. But he hasn't won a Continental Cup. Like that desire. When people ask me here, people who are new to MLS ask, like, well, how important is this tournament? How important is CONCACAF Champions Cup? And I say, hey, listen, to each their own. I would rather win this than win MLS Cup, if I'm being honest. I mean, if you want to be one of these giant clubs that Mikey Varas has said, like, our ambitions are to be a massive team, to be a monster, then you want to win a regional championship. 16 different teams have won MLS Cup. Depending on how you do the accounting, either 1 or 3 MLS clubs have won this tournament, right? I always feel like DC United and Galaxy kind of get a bad shake in this with the tournament being under a different structure when they won it back in 98 and 2000. Seattle Sounders more recently in 2023. Nothing. I would love to win MLS Cup. I'd love to win anything. Win a trophy. That's what the club wants to do. Those are the ambitions. But like this tournament, I wonder like how important would it be for Toluca, which hasn't won it in quite a while, and how important would it be for Antonio Mohamed, to your point from a little bit earlier, that this is something he hasn't won yet?
Yeah, and Seattle, if you might remember, they made it to the FIFA Club World Cup based on what they won in CONCACAF, right? So this is a tournament that will give you the opportunity to go out there on a world stage and potentially play a Barcelona, play a Manchester City, those types of teams when that tournament comes back around. So it's massive in that respect to be able to win it. Mexico and Liga MX specifically have dominated this tournament over the last 25 years. Seattle and Saprissa from Costa Rica are the only two teams to have broken up that stretch of dominance going back to 2002 or 2003, I think. To think about Toluca in particular with this tournament, they haven't won it since 2003, right? And Antonio Mohamed, for all his success in Mexico, has never been able to win anything in his career outside of Liga MX. This is a guy who was born and raised in Argentina, and he's had plenty of spells in Argentina, and he's even gone on to coach teams in Spain. So there is an onus on him to say, all right, we know that you dominate the Mexican League as you do. You've won and he won it with Tijuana back in 2012. Right. That's their only league title. Can you do anything else outside of Liga MX? Is this going to be your legacy as a manager? So I think he's thinking about these types of things now, and to be able to go out there and win a CONCACAF Champions Cup, which is ultimately the biggest prize that this region, this footballing region of the world has to offer for clubs, is going to be, again, a huge feather in his cap if he's able to achieve it. Now's the time. Now's the time to do that, because his team, his side, they're an absolute machine at this point. They've won, 6 games in a row. They haven't lost since last season. And, Adrian was right. They rested a bunch of guys, but the guys that were on the pitch starting against Juarez would be starters for any other team in Liga MX or MLS. So it's just crazy to think how good this team is. And if Mikey Barras and San Diego FC want to make their mark, not just on MLS, but on soccer in this particular region, they need to be able to provide the type of performances. I mean, ultimately, it was unexpected for them to beat Pumas, and you and I talked about it. And I expected Pumas to kind of squeak by, but I was like, okay, well, we'll give them a pass. We'll give SDFC a pass. This is their first time going out into international competition. They proved to be up to the challenge. This is a completely different monster, though. So if they're able to beat Toluca, I think, honestly, the sky's the limit for them. And I'm wearing pink right now, but that doesn't mean I'm all for Inter Miami and Lionel Messi. I mean, honestly, if you beat Toluca, you're basically removing the biggest obstacle on your way to a CONCACAF title.
I would think it's a little bit of house money, too, for SDFC. When you look at the draw, and I think we talked about it last time, when you look at the draw, you could have been drawn against, let's say, some clubs from different regions, or different, it could have been a Caribbean club. You could have been facing some team from Trinidad, right? And you go, oh, well, if you lose that one, maybe somebody who doesn't know as much would be like, oh, that feels like it's a disappointment. When you're taking on Pumas and then afterwards you're taking on Toluca, you're like, hey, like we're going opposite heavyweights here, right? Like Pumas is one of the cuatro grandes, right? Like one of the big four. And I know, maybe that's a moniker that applies to their history more than their present, but still. And then you're facing back to back. Like I always felt like, this is an interesting draw for SDFC because, like as opposed to feeling the pressure of losing to clubs that nobody had heard of, whether you're new to MLS or whether you're, kind of familiar with it, this is like, oh, those are real legitimate teams. And I don't know if they walk into this one on Wednesday night feeling like, hey boys, like we've got some house money here. Like we took down Pumas. That's a pretty big deal for us. We almost got their manager fired, right? Like Efrain Juarez is still there. Kind of surprisingly, I thought he was going to get sacked, but I don't know. I mean, maybe that allows them to play a little bit loose in this one on Wednesday night.
Yeah, again, it's not a match or it's not a series that I think most people would expect them to win. Mm-hmm. This is, again, Inter Miami, Toluca, I think, are the two teams that are kind of headed on a collision course to make the final of this tournament. If everything goes according to plan, they're on opposite ends of the bracket. But I think we've in the media and even some fans have done a poor job of really kind of focusing in on how special the San Diego FC team is and has been. So do they have an opportunity to knock off Toluca? Absolutely. I mean, we didn't expect them to get past Pumas, and we definitely didn't expect them to put up 4 goals in that first leg. So unfortunately, that's something that a guy like Antonio Mohamed is
Right.
not going to ignore.
Right.
He's been watching that tape, I assure you, for the last few weeks and saying, all right, got to avoid this, got to push here, got to take that guy out, got to make sure this guy doesn't hurt us. That's just the way it is. This is a guy, again, Antonio Mohamed, that has coached at the absolute highest level of this sport. He's coached in the La Liga, and he's not going to sleep on a team like San Diego FC. I am just especially interested in finding out whether, just how much of a fight San Diego takes to Toluca in this first leg specifically, because that second leg in Toluca is going to be very, very difficult, not just because of the level of play, but we always talk about it. San Diego FC did look gassed in that second half against Pumas. That was in Mexico City. That was nighttime. There was less contamination. There was less heat, obviously, because it was nighttime. Yeah, Toluca is at a higher altitude.
Right. Highest altitude in North America, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not going to get any easier for them. And they really need to put all their eggs in that basket in the first leg, and hopefully it works out for them, because it's not necessarily a Cinderella story, but as you said, they're playing with house money.
Will Toluca travel well? Like, would we expect to see, a significant amount of like where are they in the hierarchy of Liga MX?
I mean, they've won 6 games in a row, so that should tell you that they travel well. They're ready for any challenge at this.
But they're not like Club America or like Chivas, right? Like, we just talked about the big 4, and Pumas is kind of in there with.
I don't think we're going to get a lot of Toluca fans making the trip out to San Diego. You'll see some. San Diego is obviously a very cosmopolitan city. Not every Mexican you see around San Diego is from Tijuana. There are a lot of guys that are from different parts of the country. So I would expect a pocket of Toluca fans to be there. I would expect some folks to travel, but it's not exactly a situation where you would get 30,000 Club America or Chivas fans taking over the building, right?
Yeah. When we even had the friendly last year against Club America, like it was probably about 10,000, I would say 10,000. And that was like a under 20 team that Club America sent to Snapdragon Stadium, and it was still a lot of yellow in the stands as well. Speaking of, by the way, Leagues Cup games coming to Mexico. Does that add a little bit of sizzle to Leagues Cup?
I think it's kind of like, the last few air bubbles when somebody's drowning. Sorry for such a dark metaphor. I don't think people in Mexico are going to care much about the Leagues Cup. I mean this in terms of attendance, and I mean this in terms of coverage. I know that the sporting element of it, the fact that they have made it so that you win that tournament and you get an extra CONCACAF Champions Cup spot, which is what we're talking about, is a big deal. But I don't think Mexican clubs care too much about that either, because regardless of whether they get 5 or 6 or 7 spots in that tournament, they always end up winning it. So it's not necessarily a big deal for them to go out there and say, hey, if we win, we get into CONCACAF, because those types of teams, Cruz Azul and again, Chivas and Club America and all those teams that might be heavyweights in this tournament as well, they know that they're probably going to make it into that tournament anyway. Right. So what's the point, right?
Right.
It's been painful to watch when these Mexican teams complain about, and I think it was León last time around, that had something like 18,000 miles under their belt. I think it was Monterrey actually had like 18,000 miles under their belt for that tournament. It's just ridiculous, the amount of wear and tear that is put on these Mexican teams. I know that they've tried to fix that a little bit with those Leagues Cup games in Mexico, but guess what? Now you're going to get MLS teams that are going to be complaining about the exact same thing.
Right.
And it's just a very difficult tournament to jam into a soccer schedule. I think if Liga MX and MLS were serious about putting the screws on CONCACAF and saying, we want to turn the Leagues Cup basically into an expanded version of CONCACAF Champions Cup, ultimately CONCACAF would have to accept that. and maybe bring in other teams from other parts of the region. But they don't want to do that because they don't want to split the economic pie. They want all that money to themselves. The problem is it's not as much money as they thought it would be. They got this big boost from Lionel Messi coming in with Inter Miami a couple of years ago, but that's pretty much it. I think Club America fans and Chivas fans and all these Mexican fans in general have kind of shied away from the tournament, and they would have never done this, Leagues Cup organizers, who are MLS and Liga MX specifically, bringing games to Mexico if they didn't think that they were leaving money on the table. Now, the reason why we had all these games in the United States is because fans paying dollars, right? You can't have those types of prices in Mexico. So you can't have $80 tickets as your cheapest price point in a Liga MX stadium. So they felt like they were leaving money on the table. But you take a look at some of these attendance figures for the last couple of years, they've been brutal.
Yeah.
If you're not getting, Inter Miami, if you're not getting LAFC, if you're not getting Club America, if you're not getting Chivas, people really don't care. And I think it's kind of weighed on the organizers, and they're trying anything and everything to see if it sticks. I predict that if these next two iterations of the tournament don't go well, Leagues Cup will be done and dusted by 2028.
Yeah, who even knows what it's going to look like when MLS changes its calendar as well. Hey, if nothing else, it gives me another reason to come down to your neck of the woods when SDFC plays at Club America.
It's more
I'm
soccer.
excited about that.
It's more soccer, right?
Yeah, it's more trips. I mean, like a San Diegan, somebody who lives here in this region has like between SDFC and the Padres, to Marty's point, because they'll be playing in Mexico City, and then Leagues Cup, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 trips, that you can make down to a city where, like you said, it's a lot of fun to be around. Quick prediction for what we're going to see Wednesday night. I know, like you said, they rested some starters. Paulinho seems like he's off to a good start. Anders Dreyer scored a couple of times straight now for SDFC. I'm fascinated. What are they going to do in goal? Are they going to stick with 19-year-old Duran Feeree? Or do you do what a lot of teams do? Do you have a goalkeeper like Pablo Cisniega who you trust in this type of tournament? I'm kind of fascinated to know what direction Mikey goes at goalkeeper, but based on an absence of a couple of those details, what do you think Wednesday night? We'll talk about next week.
I mean, I think you ride the hot hand. I think Pablo is definitely a guy that will have some familiarity with the folks over there at Toluca and Liga MX in general. But I think you stick with what's been working.
You think you stick with Duran Feeree?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Let him try his luck against possibly the best team in North America.
Hey, man, this is a guy that faced Dortmund, by the way, at Snapdragon Stadium and got peppered by a team that rolled out its preferred lineup. So, like,
the American mentality is such that you don't care if you're 17, 18, 19. You're going to go out there and you're going to give it your all. So I think this game, this first leg in San Diego, 2-2. I think we're going to see a lot of attacking football. We're going to see a lot of counterattacking from Toluca. There will be some mistakes on the defensive side in San Diego FC. I think that's the issue that any MLS team faces when they go up against these Mexican clubs. But I think San Diego FC's offensive firepower is going to give Toluca some headaches. And 2-2 would be a great game for the neutral fan. But it would set up Toluca to kind of finish it off the next week for sure.
Yeah, away goals, remember, they do matter. Do you miss away goals in a lot of these competitions?
I get confused. I mean, maybe that's just me being old now, but it's like I forget about the Champions League rule change all the time, and I'm like, oh well, we're going to penalties. Wait, no, this team has more away goals or whatever, and it switches back and forth.
The away goal totally messed with Pumas in the first round.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
They got that banger in the first 10, 11 minutes, and then he's like, all right, everybody, park the bus. We're not doing jack shit for the rest of this tournament.
I think it's kind of I think it's poor form strategically to kind of put all of your hopes on that away goal. I think you got to play 180 minutes regardless of what's going on. So that was Pumas' mistake. Again, Toluca, they're not going to make that mistake.
Yeah. They will not as well. All right, we will be back at some point with Friar Territory, Marty, and yours truly. I think we have 3 shows lined up for this week. Eric, I'm excited. I'm excited to make my way there next Wednesday. You and I will be making our way from Mexico City to Toluca. We haven't figured out if we're going to be in a car or a train, but we'll square that away between now and next week. I'm super excited to connect in person and also get a chance to go check out La Bombonera. There's a lot of fans that are making their way down from San Diego as well. So
it's going to be really fun. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that place, have you been there since the remodel?
No, not since the remodel. It's been a while.
Looks amazing on television. I'm a fan of the way it looks. So I took a chance with the Pumas one. I canceled my flight for the second leg. I feel like it's going to be all right. So let's save it for the second leg against Toluca. So I'm glad we did that. Anything we can promote for you at Eric Gomez 86 on social media? You're always involved in coverage on ESPN.com and all the different channels. I saw your recent piece about Chucky Lozano, by the way.
Yeah, that was in Spanish. We're working on some English language stuff as well. And, as we get closer and closer to the World Cup, I'll let you guys know. But just, follow ESPN FC and ESPN Deportes if you speak Spanish.
Well, I mean, even here, I think, counting down to the World Cup, 94 days away, my man.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close. So that should be good.
It should be good. All right. I look forward to many more of these conversations. Thank you for a full hour of your time on everything. Marty and I will see you on Friar Territory. Thank you very much. Again, you can subscribe if you're listening to the podcast. Find the YouTube channel, Marty Time Television. If you're watching Marty Time TV, you can find the Section 1904 podcast. So this is a little bit of a collaboration. And as always, support our friend Eric Gomez and everything that he's doing. He's doing tremendous work there. A guy that grew up here and now lives there, but always connected to his hometown. Thanks, pal. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. Yeah, should be fun, and we'll see you down here in a few days.
Butted head with quite a few former Padres managers. What's your?
Thanks, Marty. I'm not going to butt heads with Stamen.
You're not?
No way.
Why not?
I just don't see that happening. Don't see it happening.
What did you think? Were you surprised?
No. I was surprised in the sense of, he hasn't coached before, but not surprised with the respect he has in the clubhouse, in the game, and being familiar with the organization. Great hire.